Hi there, Happy New Year. Welcome back to Friday Money Lunch, our webinar series about real-life personal finance. In 2015, we did 6 webinars, all of which are available at the Mindful Money Toolbox if you've registered at happinessdividend.com. We're going to add 6, maybe 8 or 9 in 2016, along with the more timely updates in the form of our newsletter and our Mindful Money Minute videos. The Toolbox has all of our recorded webinars covering investing topics such as before you invest, investing basics, and after you invest, let the mind games begin. We also cover some real life topics in our real life series number 1. Today we're going to start our real life series number 2, moving from debt to savings, maximizing your 401k. And our last webinar was about specific issues that face women around money. If any of these are an issue for you, or if you'd like to refresh your knowledge, go ahead and check those out at http://www.happinessdividend.com/toolbox-login. It's on the screen. I'm Jonathan Dio. I'm the founder of Dio Wealth Management, where my team does one-on-one financial planning, and we offer portfolio risk and tax management services to about 220 families in the San Francisco Bay Area. I also started the Happiness Dividend blog, which I'm going to hope you're going to go back to often, where I blog about true wealth. And through the blog and our videos and webinars, I try to help people get on the right track with their personal finances. True wealth, as I define it, has an element of personal finance and money for sure, but it also places finance into the context of our fuller and richer lives. Money and concerns about money and personal finance, financial decisions can take up a lot of time if you let it, but it doesn't have to. We try to break personal finance down and investing down into the simplest decisions so you can leave more room in your lives for those things that really matter. True wealth, for me, has always been about those places where love and money overlap. We've covered some important topics in our real life series so far, and today we're going to add to that list with a presentation on the specific concerns that arise when divorce happens. Now, when I talk about divorce, I speak from a place of both professional and, importantly, personal experience. Before I met Kate, and we were married in 2003, I was married to another woman for about 5 years right out of college. My first marriage ended in a way that left me pretty distraught. To be honest, I was totally a disaster. I had more questions than we're going to have to go into today, but I recovered, and if you're going through a divorce, so will you. We just hope that this will help. As a quick reminder, this is general information and education. Everyone's situation is different, so please don't think of this as specific recommendations. Think about what you learned today, and then before you act, ask questions and get specific answers that are suited to your needs, specifically. Most financial decisions involve trade-offs, and all investing involves risk. What we're trying to do today is get you through a really tough life experience, so when you do start investing again for yourself, you've got a plan you can stick with. Always and everywhere, it's the plan you believe in and stick with that'll bring you closer to your own financial success. That's what we're trying to accomplish. Before we get into today's topic, I want to remind you of our fundamental philosophy, which is, it's never what markets and economies do that make you successful. It's what you do, or sometimes most importantly, don't do, that makes you successful. This is so important during times of heightened emotions, for example, during market volatility, or during massive life changes, like a divorce. Everyone that goes through divorce faces specific financial challenges, both in terms of things that they can control and things that they can't. In the end, even things that are out of your control can be overcome by taking the right steps, going slowly, and doing the right things. Anyone can follow these steps and become both more financially successful and happier. It takes patience and discipline more than it takes smarts. It is our belief that anyone can be successful, even if they've gone through or are going through something as difficult as divorce. Divorce does not disqualify you. As we get going, stay engaged, take notes, write down any questions you have, and at the end here, we'll try to take a couple questions. It's pretty complete, and I don't anticipate having a lot of time, but if you do have some questions at the end and we have some time, we'll answer them. If we don't have time, please do ask them through our social media channels. We're going to do our best to answer everything that you ask. We sent an email that had a link to the takeaway for today's webinar. If you haven't already done so, you can go to happinessdividend.com and click on the Mindful Money Toolbox and look for a real life series, When Divorce Happens. It's a PDF. Let's begin, shall we? Our presentation today is When Divorce Happens. Again, my name is Jonathan Dio, and today I'm going to talk to you about what you should do and what you should be thinking about if you find yourself either surprised with a divorce or needing to initiate a divorce yourself. Let's start with an all too familiar story. Susan and David meet, they fall in love, they get married, they stay married for 15 years and carve out a comfortable, stable life for themselves. They own a 4-bedroom home, nice community, good schools. Over the course of their marriage, they have grown their nest egg to help their family. They've achieved some of their financial goals. They've started funding for their children's college education. They've got a nice retirement fund, and they've got enough discretionary income to go on a family vacation maybe once or twice a year. However, over time, they find themselves disagreeing more, fighting, or simply ignoring each other at times. Their love fades, and a bad situation grows. Unable to resolve the differences, they agree to get divorced. But despite, parting as friends, they struggle for a couple of years to settle their marital assets. They decided to sell the house and split the proceeds. David, faced with legal bills, alimony, and child support, moved out of the family home and into a small 2-bedroom apartment. Susan remained in the family home and re-entered the workforce after years of being a stay-at-home mom and is struggling to find financial balance. The college money is pretty much used up in the divorce and in setting up a second household, and the girls are going to be facing some heavy student loans due to the family's divorce and the financial situation. Does any of this sound familiar? Unfortunately, it's pretty typical in the world of divorce. Here's some interesting statistics on divorce today. We all know the one that's 50% of marriages end in divorce, but that number is 2.8 million couples call it quits each year. Again, that's roughly half of all marriages. Here's an interesting one. Divorce rates of couples over 50 have doubled in the last 20 years, and 40% of children in the United States have divorced parents. Divorce is prevalent. No matter what age you are, it can be a financial disaster. The good thing to know is that there are ways to prepare yourself. That's what we're going to talk about here in the next 25-30 minutes. Divorce can be a big financial challenge. When a couple decides to call it quits, the issues quickly shift to money and the results can be a slugfest. Even in so-called amicable breakups, it can take a long time to settle, but it doesn't need to turn your life into a financial wasteland. There are ways to reduce the costs, even with small tricks, like making sure you've prepared everything and you're ready when you visit your attorney so you aren't chewing up the clock on your dime. Some lawyers understand that you have a budget and will consider doing a divorce work for a flat fee. And this might be a good alternative for someone who knows what their budget is and is aware of the kind of workload that a lawyer is going to dedicate to their case. Divorce in general is expensive. The national cost average of divorce is around $15,000. Exact figures are difficult to come by, but the best estimates, according to divorcemagazine.com, tells us that the average cost of doing it yourself, like software package, is between $50 and $250. Hiring a lawyer to do mediation is between $3,000 and $5,000. But if you go through litigation, you're going to spend between $8,000 and $130,000. The larger the assets involved, the more you should expect to spend. In fact, it's been reported that the cases where large assets are involved could be way more than the $130,000 that we've show in the slide. That's why divorce has become a jaw-dropping $28 billion a year industry. So how does divorce impact family? Let's take a look at some of the ways. The cost of divorce can deplete savings for future milestones, for college educations, for a child's wedding. It can impact your retirement lifestyle and security should you be forced to tap in your savings early. You can face real estate refiling fees if someone walks away with more property than the other. You might have to deal with loss of big tax breaks, and you will certainly deal with more work, less time, as you lose the economies of scale associated with a single household. Before, one of you had to take out the garbage. Now, both of you have to take out the garbage. There are many things you can do at the beginning of the process to help you get off on the right foot. This is the time to create some distance between you and your spouse. This starts by closing joint checking accounts and opening up your own checking savings account. And this allows you to be in control of your finances, but it also helps you start to build your own credit history if you haven't done it during the marriage. Also, remember to know where your assets stand. Keep track of any other savings and retirement accounts, 401ks, Roth IRAs, and avoid withdrawing money to minimize tax penalties. You've got to be familiar with the divorce rules for your own state. Laws differ depending on where you're living and where you're filing for divorce. And sometimes there's a gender differential there. Getting organized will relieve you of stress not only early on in the process, but throughout the entire divorce procedure. Having your finances and access to other information arranged is a huge help to you, anyone else that's trying to help you, such as a lawyer or your financial professional. Paying down your debt and, very important, avoiding new debt while setting up a second household is important to keep in mind. As a reminder, when a couple splits, their credit doesn't, and you don't want to start off your new life with bad credit. While sympathetic to your situation, creditors want to be paid. As such, each person that is named on a loan is liable for the full amount of that loan until the debt balance is paid off. This means you can refinance a loan so that only one person is responsible for the loan and will be paying it on their own. However, that person will need a strong individual credit score to have approval from a lending company if you're going to try to refinance. Paying off debt can help you keep your credit score in good standing and or improve your existing score, something important to keep in mind as you start to reestablish your own individual credit. As a quick side note, to track your progress, you can request a free loan report from each credit bureau once a year. Building your own credit history is the first step in creating your own financial independence, and it's easier than you might believe. Getting rid of joint debt by refinancing or paying it off should be the top priority on your list when it comes to getting into favorable standing with credit companies. But there are other tricks you can use to get an even better credit score. We're going to look at a few of them here. First, and obviously, pay your bills on time. To accomplish this, you can set up reminders and automatic payments through your bank, or there's an app for that. Don't open additional credit cards. This can actually hurt your credit limit and become hard to manage on your own. Stay under the credit limits that you have. Many lenders favor people who spend less than 30% of the amount that they're offered. Be patient. The length of time you have your own credit history accounts for 15% of your score. Check your accounts about every 6 months or a year just to see how you're improving and to make sure everything is correct. You can do this for free online. Now, the divorce settlement can determine who is responsible for what loans after a divorce is finalized. Once you determine who's going to be handling any outstanding and future loans, be sure to have it outlined in the settlement paperwork. It's also a good idea to outline any additional monetary considerations, such as taxes, so that both parties are aware of what they're responsible for down the road. So, include provisions in your settlement which outline those responsibilities with regard to future debt payments, penalties and interest that might arise from missed payments, taxes that might materialize after the divorce is final that are, relate back to the marriage. While it may seem premature, you should sit down at some point and develop a budget based on your new single status. Where you think you may live, what your income's going to be, what type of lifestyle you're going to live, what type of education you want to jointly provide for your children, etc. Conducting the analysis ahead of time will help you determine if you can maintain your current lifestyle or have trade-offs to make. The lifestyle you might envision for yourself might be different than one you can afford, and what you need to modify to stay on track financially. When budgeting your cash flow, it helps to know what you're looking to save for, which means dividing up your expenses into both short-term buckets and long-term buckets. Now, when we talk about short-term, we're talking about occurring in or relating to a relatively short period of time, say next 3-6 months. Long-term means occurring in or relating to a long period of time. Short-term items, everyday things, versus long-term items or expenses down the road. You're going to be lucky if you maintain your original goals in your new single status. Many people who go through divorce have to recognize that things are not going to be the way they had planned. In terms of long-term financial goals, college for kids, retirement plans, and the way in which you save for your goals or how you're allocating your cash might need to change to help you stay on track. It's going to be tight. It's going to be difficult, but you can't stop saving for your long-term financial goals. That's your future. Now, aside from retirement assets, all marital assets should be taken into consideration when negotiating a settlement. The marriage assets include all property acquired during the course of your marriage, regardless of ownership or who holds the title to it. One way to know what marital assets you have accumulated in your marriage is to use the following list as a guide. Go ahead and take a picture of this with your smartphone or do a screen capture. You can come back to this as often as you want, but the list of potential marital assets is going to include checking accounts. You want to review the statements and cancel checks for the past few years looking for purchases of investments or property. Investment accounts, insurance policies. Some insurance policies have cash value. Joint property, cash, money market funds, CDs, cars, savings accounts, annuity contracts, retirement plan statements, other company benefits like pensions or stock options or RSUs. You want to look at real estate, investment property. You want to look at stocks and bonds or anything that might hold stocks and bonds, investments. And you want to look at the increase of any premarital assets. Make sure that you'll stay in better financial standing, especially if you need to liquidate any assets in the short-term future. There's not an exact science to dividing assets, including their current dollar value. During the process, there are several factors that are going to be considered, such as the length of the marriage. If you're only married for a couple months, divisions are easier. Income property brought into the marriage from each person. Financial status of each person when divorce is finalized. How much each person contributed to the education, earning power, and training of the other spouse. The needs of the custodial parent to maintain the lifestyle of the children. And any obligation and rights from a previous marriage for either party. They're also going to look at any post-nuptial agreement. You might have agreed to something after you were married. Age, health, occupation, source of income, and vocational skills, etc. of each party are important. A financial professional can help you and guide you as to which assets are good to liquidate for your short-term versus your long-term, regarding their value, tax implications, etc. Now, before negotiating any settlement, there are several key things you should keep in mind. First, you're going to have to know the liquidity of your assets. Liquidity is the ability to convert an asset to cash quickly. In divorce settlements, marital assets are divided appropriately. Sometimes this is achieved by calculating the entire value of an estate, of all the assets, and then simply dividing it down the middle. This means that the value of the assets each party receives is equivalent to the other. But be careful. Often one party will receive a majority of their settlement in liquid assets. Illiquid assets like the home, the car. Another party might receive them in liquid assets like stocks and bonds and cash and retirement plans. Make sure you understand the impact of this type of settlement. If you receive mostly illiquid assets, the house or the car, how will you continue to pay your bills? What other types of cash flow can you rely on for your daily life? How long is it going to take you to convert those illiquid assets into cash to sell your house or sell your car? Do you have enough cash for an emergency? Will you need to borrow money to make ends meet? If so, for how long? And is this realistic? You got to make sure you have enough liquidity to meet your needs. Despite all the sentimental attachments to certain objects, it may be your advantage to agree on a settlement that will provide you with some level of liquidity and/or access to liquid assets. Keep that in mind. Now, it can be noble to stay in your current home, especially if there are children involved. However, it's important to know that this might not be the most cost-effective lifestyle. If your cash flow suddenly changes, having this home might put an even greater strain on you financially. Have you considered what the basic costs of keeping up with your house, such as heating and cooling, would be? What about taxes? It's another cost that you can't avoid, and you have to consider it if you're going to stay. Also, keep in mind that you would have to be maintaining the home on your own. If a tree falls in the backyard, can you pay someone $1,000, $4,000 to come and clean it up? Though it can be a tough decision in a difficult time, selling your home might be the best option for you to consider. Make sure you at least consider it. Now, you also need to consider, along with liquidity, the tax implications of your settlement. While it may be appealing to receive the house or brokerage account as part of their settlement, individuals are often unaware of the additional tax liabilities specific assets may carry with them. Taxes can often be a very costly part of your settlement and can have a dramatic effect if not addressed. For instance, short-term and long-term capital gains taxes may be leveraged on the sale of any assets, property, securities, etc. When you begin negotiations, make sure you know the cost basis and depreciation of your investment accounts, individual securities, or real estate. Some other things to keep in mind are short-term gains. If you hold assets for less than a year and you sell them in less than a year, they're taxed at the same rate as your income, a higher amount. Long-term gains, assets held for more than a year, are taxed less aggressively. Tax rates differ depending on your state, so consult your financial professional or what makes the most sense for you. Overall, the important thing is to know what impact taxes can have on your settlement, especially if you may need to convert some of those assets into cash just to help make ends meet. It's best to consult your financial advisor about how taxes can impact you or your CPA. All right, what's alimony? Now, alimony is an allowance paid to a person by their spouse or former spouse for maintenance, granted by a court upon a legal separation or divorce. Alimony impacts both parties involved in the divorce. If you pay alimony, you can file for a tax deduction. If you receive alimony, you're going to pay taxes on it. You can receive alimony in a scheduled monthly payment or in a large lump sum at the end of the divorce process. Also keep in mind that each case is unique. Depending on what state you file in, it can impact how much will be granted in alimony. Now, receiving alimony can be very helpful during an overwhelming phase, but remember that you need to pay tax on the amount provided from your spouse. There are several options on paying the tax. Perhaps the best thing you can do is you can pay estimated tax each quarter to both the IRS and your state to avoid one large payment at the end of the year if you're not working. You could also, if you have a job, you can increase the amount taken out of your paycheck to offset the impact of increased payments. Consult the tax table on the IRS website to view your potential payments. You're going to owe more if you're receiving alimony, and you got to be aware of that, and you've got to reserve for it. Don't let it be a surprise. But the silver lining to paying alimony is that it does qualify as a tax deduction, but only if you and your spouse, former spouse, do not file a joint tax return. If you pay them out in cash, if you no longer share the same home as your former spouse, and you cannot make the payment after the death of your former spouse. Remember that alimony does not always last forever. It's always a good idea to review your financial situation and plan for the future by saving what you can while you can. Speak to your advisor, your tax person, your divorce attorney about ways you can help prepare for that future. Okay. In addition to alimony, there's often child support, which is a court-ordered payment typically made by a non-custodial divorced parent to support one's minor child or children. Child support is separate from alimony and is not taxed, nor is it tax deductible. It's an expectation that the family's going to pay for support the kids. It's determined by a parent's income. Payments are usually made on a monthly basis to support just the monthly expenses of the kids, and the amount to be paid can greatly differ from state to state depending on where you file for divorce. Now that you know what common financial mistakes to avoid, you'll need to take steps to protect yourself and begin building financial security for your admittedly new future. Relationships and responsibilities have changed. Your will usually determines how your estate is to be distributed at your death. Review it immediately to make sure it reflects your new situation and the objectives, so that in the event of your death, your assets can go to the people you designate. If you have small children, you may also want to ensure you and your ex-spouse have discussed how those assets will be distributed. Talk to your attorney about your options. Select a guardian for minor children. Leave written instructions regarding how assets are managed and used to benefit and protect children, and about the ages or life events that should trigger trust payments. Do they get paid money at college age, or for the wedding, or at particular ages along the way, at 25, 35? You got to fund your children's future needs. So mutual funds, life insurance, and college savings plans do not name minor children as beneficiaries. Consider using a trust. Make trust arrangements, pick a trusted person advisor as a trustee, talk to an attorney about the details. That's the best thing you can do there. And at last, you're going to want to update your beneficiary designations. It's often, you don't want your ex-spouse to be receiving your IRA. To the extent it's possible, reorganize your assets so it's easier for you, your family, and any licensed professionals you're dealing with to deal with it and refer to it. The final step to managing your divorce is to regain control over your own life. The single-parent family is a fact of life today. According to 2011 figures provided by the U.S. Census Bureau, of the 74+ million children under the age of 18 living in the United States, 27%, that's 20 million kids, live with a single parent. These single-parent households are economically unique, especially when it comes to protecting dependents from financial uncertainties. This is because unless there's an absent parent providing support, economic security hinges completely on the custodial parent's income. This creates an at-risk situation for kids. The reason? The death of the custodial parent will almost certainly lead to the end of the existing family unit, and without prior planning, this engages the state and the foster system. If you're a single parent, your premature death could have consequences for your children in several ways, beyond just the emotional loss of a parent. A third party could administer their inheritance if they're minors. Your assets could be put in trust and managed by a court-appointed administrator whose fees would be taken directly out of your estate. Other family members, including your ex-spouse and their family, could become entangled in court battles over custody, guardianship, and financial control. There are precautions that you can take now to help you maintain control of the situation, have your wishes carried out, reduce conflict among surviving family members, and most importantly, provide stability for children that are involved and already dealing with the emotional nightmare of losing a parent. Planning for your child's future means understanding what your options are. A trust or will are two solid options for your child, but only if you know what they entitle your family to and when. In simple terms, a trust is a legal agreement that you create to safeguard your assets or property until they are passed on to your heirs. A trust agreement spells out the specific rules that you want followed when your estate is passed on to beneficiaries. Trusts do not replace wills and usually deal with specific assets and property. They can be activated before your death. Where a will is also a legal agreement that you create to safeguard your assets or property until they are passed on to your heirs. A will governs almost everything that makes up your estate, and you can allocate assets to your beneficiaries. Wills only become effective upon your death. Both can be outlined with the help of a professional or an estate planning attorney. Receiving retirement plan assets from your spouse is very common, especially if one spouse worked and the other one didn't, which doesn't happen as much today, but it's happened for a long time. If you don't understand the rules, you can be penalized and end up paying unnecessary taxes and penalties. To avoid these penalties, retirement assets must be transferred to a spouse under a qualified domestic relations order, or QDRO. This transaction is not subject to any early withdrawal penalties. However, if not made correctly, transfers can be subject to a mandatory 20% tax withholding. To avoid this 20% withholding, transfers should be made directly from one retirement account to another. However, once the assets have been transferred to the new account, traditional retirement account rules and penalties are going to apply. So if you withdraw assets, and it's before you're 59 and a half, you're going to be subject to ordinary income tax and maybe even that 10% early withdrawal penalty. Not to complicate matters further, but for the purposes of this discussion, IRAs are not considered to be a retirement plan and are not governed by Quadro or subject to these same rules. So before taking a distribution or initiating a transfer, you should consult your tax advisor and with each specific financial institution regarding their rules and procedures on divorce settlements involving IRA assets. It's always helpful to speak with your financial professional about what makes the most sense for you. In some settlements, insurance policies may be required to help ensure the value of alimony payments, child support, or some other financial need. While necessary, insurance policies can be tricky. If this applies in your specific situation and you're the person for whom the policy is obtained, it is critical for you to ensure that you are named as the owner or irrevocable beneficiary. Failure to do so could cause financial problems for you later on, especially if your ex-spouse stops making premium payments on the policy. If you're not named properly, you may not know that the policy is no longer in effect until it's too late. Remember, if the insurance policy is purchased for you, it is critical that you're named either the owner or the irrevocable beneficiary. If you are not named properly, your ex-spouse can stop making premium payments and you would never know until you try to enforce the policy, only to find out it has lapsed and no longer exists. Make sure your life insurance aligns with your new family structure. A person can also receive Social Security benefits as a divorced spouse on a former spouse's Social Security record if he or she was married to the former spouse for at least 10 years, is at least 62 years old, is yet unmarried, and is not entitled to a higher Social Security benefit on his or her own record. The maximum benefit a divorced spouse can receive is 50% of the benefit the working spouse would receive at full retirement age. It's important to be aware that benefits paid before the full retirement age of the spouse are reduced based on the age of the spouse at the time benefits are received. This is very complex. Call your Social Security office to get this figured out. Obviously, in just about 40 minutes, we've just scratched the surface. You may have lots of questions. There are obviously a lot of things to keep in mind when you are preparing to file for divorce, or if you've already started the process. We want to, before we finish here, just recap the major topics we covered today. First, you're going to have to revise your will or trust. You're going to want to sever unnecessary ties, financial ties with your ex-spouse, and set up your own accounts. You're going to want to update beneficiary designations for retirement plans, wills, trust, insurance plans, and other investments. And you're going to want to review overall retirement situation as a single person. Take a look at the life insurance ownership if it's necessary, and establish or review your own investment plan with your financial professional, considering your new single status. Before we end, I'm going to do a quick reality check. When I went through my divorce, I didn't initiate it. I missed all the signs and everything started out as a complete surprise to me. I was an emotional wreck and it'd been nearly impossible for me to follow even the simplest list. I felt like a failure. I was unloved. And through the support of my family and my brother especially and my best friend Gary, I was able to come back around. Today, I'm doing better than I ever thought possible. I got a wonderful wife. I've got great kids. My finances are in order. I've got a good life. But if someone would have told me before or while I was going through the divorce that any of this was possible, I wouldn't have believed them. And now I understand that you won't believe me either, but it's true. Through working with both men and women going through divorce, I've come to learn that this is somewhat normal when a divorce comes as a surprise to you. I've also learned that when you're initiating divorce, you're going to travel your own emotional roller coaster. No matter how it starts or what your emotions are, be patient with yourself. Take it step by step. Don't be afraid to ask questions, even of us. And importantly, ask for help if you need it. Okay. Thanks for attending When Divorce Happens. This is our first presentation in our Real Life Series number 2. Over the next few months, we're going to do 2 additional presentations. In March, we're going to do one on kids and money. And then in April, we're going to do Social Security, Medicare, and retirement. Now, if you thought today's presentation was valuable or think either the kids and money or the Social Security retirement presentations would be valuable, please let folks know about happinessdividend.com. Everyone that registers will be invited to our new presentations, as well as they'll have access to all the archive of previous presentations, including today's. Now, this all started with our Mindful Money Investing 3-part webinar video, which should be an anchor when you start investing. Everything's available in the Mindful Money Toolbox. When we finish recording and editing this series, this one and the next two, these will be up there as well. Now, I think we have time today for 2 questions. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you ask a question and it isn't answered here, please ask us again through our social media channels, Twitter and Facebook, and we will answer you directly. And if we get a lot of the same questions, we're going to write an answer in our Mindful Money newsletter, or we may even answer your question in one of our Mindful Money Minute videos. Okay, our first question comes from MS, and it's, I've just been served divorce papers, what do I do? First, I'm sorry. That's kind of how it happened to me. The first big question I had to get over in the very beginning was this: was I going to fight for my marriage, or was I going to just let it go? Now, I did what I felt I had to do. I fought for my marriage. And in hindsight, this, while totally necessary for me, made the whole process way more painful for me. And I would guess for her too. We went to counseling for months, and in the end, there never really was any hope that counseling could have made any difference or that we would get back together. I couldn't hear it when she said that her mind was made up early on. I couldn't believe it when she said it was irreconcilable. You may be in the same boat. But once I understood, and once you understand, that the path towards divorce was inevitable, we're able to seek advice about our rights and responsibilities in California. For us, it was really about understanding and dividing assets because we didn't have any kids. If you do have kids, then after you get your legal advice as to your rights and responsibilities in the state you're in, the next thing is to work out a co-parenting plan with you and your spouse. How will the two of you provide for and spend time with your kids during and after the divorce? Kids are resilient, but divorce can be really hard on them, so step very carefully here and get help. Then it really comes down to the process we discussed earlier. Separate your finances, close your joint accounts, open individual accounts, organize files, begin to understand your assets and your debts, begin managing separate cash flows for 2 separate households, and then start negotiating your divorce settlement. Be patient on the road to the outcomes. Make sure you take care of yourself and plan for the future, your future, in the process. We have time for one more question, and it's coming in. Our final question from NE is, my wife always took care of my family finances. I don't even know where all our investments are. How do I know I'm getting a fair settlement when I don't even know what our assets and debts might be? First, with love and kindness in my heart, letting someone else manage your finances entirely without your knowledge or input is a mistake that I hope you recognize now and don't repeat. Not knowing what you have can make it very difficult to create a fair settlement in a divorce, if your spouse isn't entirely honest. That being said, the laws and protections are on your side here. The first thing you do is simply ask your spouse for copies of all your financial records. If upon this request they produce a list of assets that appears complete, it includes checking and savings and maybe some kids' accounts, and it has the house, and if you own other property, it lists assets and debts on those property. It includes IRAs and investment accounts and some employer-sponsored benefits and perhaps even some cash value insurance plans. If you have all those things in a list and you're comfortable that it's all there, then you're probably fine. If, however, you sense that your spouse isn't offering a complete disclosure, or if you know loosely maybe of a particular asset that hasn't been included, then you may want to dig deeper. First, tax returns will often reference different assets, and you can review these relative to the list your spouse has provided to determine completeness. Second, you can review your checking and savings account because cash flows into or out of family accounts might be an indicator of investments made or returns received. You can use these cash flows to cross-reference with your spouse's stated asset list. Third, and this is a good one, loan applications are a good place to find lists of assets. If you've recently refinanced your house, it's likely to include most of the family assets in that application as your spouse attempted to look as good as possible for the lending institution. Finally, if this isn't enough, you feel your spouse is still hiding assets, you can hire an attorney who specializes in the divorce discovery process and ask them to dig into the financial history. An attorney or judge may take a deposition from your spouse under oath. Anyone who lies under oath can be charged with perjury. This might be just enough pressure to shake a dishonest spouse into talking and divulging everything. I'm sorry I don't have more time to take questions today, but once again, if you do have additional questions, please reach out through our social media channels, Twitter and Facebook. Take one more second, look at the disclosures here. Remember, we aren't providing specific advice and recommendations. These are general frameworks and thought processes that you can employ should you find yourself going through a divorce or initiating a divorce. Get more specific answers to your particular situation before you take any action. As always, if you think this content was valuable, help me spread the word. Follow us on Twitter, tweet about us, like us on Facebook, post some of our events, reach out to someone you care about and tell them to subscribe. Help someone else begin to educate themselves and get ahead. I want to thank you again for spending so much time with us today. I hope to see you next month as we talk about kids and cash. As always, I wish you way more than luck. Thanks.